He's just the janitor. A mocking laugh rang out. Contemptuous eyes from a group of co-workers turned toward Lucas, his worn suit looking out of place in the elegant dining room. At the next table, Clara Moretti, young CEO, sat straight-backed, eyes calm and observing. The air grew thick as the sound of spoons against glasses rang out with contempt. Lucas looked down, hands clenched tight, wanting nothing more than to disappear. "We're just joking, for fun." Someone lowered their voice, but the cruel smile remained. Sophie, his daughter, sat at home waiting, believing Daddy's meeting a kind lady. Lucas prepared to stand and leave, humiliation rising to his throat. Clara suddenly spoke, her voice resonating. "If this is a joke, I've never seen anyone more courageous and worthy of respect." No one knew that this very moment would pull them into a story far beyond a blind date, where truth, tears, and love would all be revealed. Lucas Kane, 35 years old, single dad, working as a janitor at Moretti Corporation. Lean and wiry build, calloused hands, eyes hard but always gentle with his daughter. He'd once been a Navy mechanic, but left service early to care for his sick wife, then stayed alone to raise Sophie. Sophie Kane, 7 years old, innocent and trusting, always believing her father was a hero. She often wrote small notes to tuck in his pocket. "Daddy, keep going." A group of college-educated co-workers planned a cruel prank, inviting Lucas to a fancy blind date to mock him. Lucas wore his old suit, left all his savings with a neighbor watching Sophie, heart nervous but naively hopeful. The dinner turned into a spectacle. Lucas pulled out as the comedy act. Clara Moretti, 28 years old, CEO of the corporation, happened to be present and witnessed everything. When Lucas prepared to leave, Clara intervened, stunning everyone. Lucas felt both grateful and ashamed, quietly bowing and leaving. Clara couldn't forget his eyes, full of dignity yet shattered. The next day, Clara went down to the corporate basement and happened to see Lucas cleaning, while Sophie sat on a chair waiting with a coloring book. The child hesitantly offered Clara a page full of flowers, saying, "I drew this for you because you were with Daddy last night." Clara took it, unexpectedly moved to tears, never imagining that in her world of luxury, such a simple gift could exist. The setup had been cruel in its simplicity. Lucas's co-workers, people who'd never spoken to him except to complain about a missed spot or a slow elevator, had created a fake dating profile using his photo. They'd matched him with what appeared to be a successful businesswoman, sent him excited messages about how she was interested in meeting him, and convinced him to spend money he didn't have on a suit rental and dinner reservation at the city's most expensive restaurant. Lucas had been terrified but hopeful. Sophie had been so excited when he told her about the date, insisting on helping him pick out a tie from the thrift store, practicing what he should say. "Just be yourself, Daddy," she'd advised with the wisdom of a child who believed her father was perfect. "Tell her about me and about your job and how you're a good person." But there had been no date, just a table full of his co-workers, phones out and recording, waiting to capture his humiliation when he realized he'd been set up. The maitre d' had tried to turn him away at the door. His rented suit was too cheap, too obvious, too wrong for this place. But Lucas had a reservation, had saved money, had hope. When he'd walked in and seen his co-workers' faces, seen their phones pointed at him like weapons, understanding had crashed over him like a wave. This was a joke. He was the joke. "Oh my God, he actually came," one of them had laughed. "Did you really think someone like you could get a date with a professional woman?" Another had sneered. Lucas had stood there frozen, as every person in the restaurant turned to stare. He'd felt 7 years old again, wearing hand-me-downs to school, being laughed at for being poor. But then he'd thought of Sophie, waiting at home, believing in him, and he'd started to turn away with as much dignity as he could muster. That's when Clara had spoken. She'd been dining alone at a nearby table, had watched the entire cruel setup unfold. And something in her, something she thought she'd buried under years of corporate coldness, had snapped awake. "If this is a joke," she'd said, standing up, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent restaurant, "I've never seen anyone more courageous and worthy of respect than this man who came here with hope and left with dignity intact. The co-workers had frozen, recognizing her too late. This was Clara Moretti, their CEO, the woman who could end their careers with a word. Lucas had turned back, confused, and seen her walking toward him. "I'm Clara," she'd said, extending her hand. "And if you're still interested in dinner, I'd be honored to join you." A trace of authenticity, Sophie's flower drawing given to Clara. A child's grateful artwork for the stranger who'd defended her father, drawn with crayons on paper torn from a coloring book. Lucas had been too stunned to refuse. They'd sat down together while his former tormentors slunk away, and for the first time in years, Lucas had eaten in a restaurant without feeling like he didn't belong. Because Clara had made it clear, he belonged exactly where he was. Clara began noticing Lucas more, no longer just the cleaning person. One rainy afternoon, she saw Sophie sitting soaked in the lobby, waiting for her father, clutching a battered metal lunchbox. Clara sat down beside her. Sophie opened the lunchbox. Just white rice and a burned fried egg. "Daddy made this for me." The child smiled brightly despite the burnt smell. Clara tried a bite, forcing a smile. "It's good." From that day on, she often went to the cafeteria, coincidentally meeting Lucas and his daughter. During one visit, Lucas awkwardly shared he'd lost his wife, once thought about quitting to find other work, but Sophie needed stability. Clara listened silently, for the first time not glancing at her watch. All three sat in the noisy cafeteria, but the space around them felt unusually warm. Sophie drew another picture. Me, Daddy, Miss Clara eating together. Clara looked at that drawing and unexpectedly saw a fragment of her own childhood memories. Longing for parents to sit together, something she never had. Lucas carefully folded a paper napkin to wipe Sophie's mouth. Clara saw a rare gentleness in a man who'd been looked down upon. That evening, Clara brought the drawing to her office, placing it next to her late father's photo. For the first time, the image of the cold CEO was moved by a child's drawing. The relationship deepened gradually, built on small moments that felt revolutionary to all three of them. Clara started arriving at work earlier, timing it so she'd see Lucas finishing his night shift. They'd exchange brief greetings, nothing more, but something in those moments felt significant. She learned his routine. He worked from midnight to 8 a.m., slept for a few hours while Sophie was at school, then picked her up and spent the afternoon with her before his next shift began. "Don't you ever rest?" Clara asked one morning, finding him looking particularly exhausted. "Sleep is overrated when you have a 7-year-old who believes you can do anything," Lucas replied with a tired smile. Sophie had become a regular presence in the building. The security guards knew her, the cafeteria staff saved her small treats, and she'd wave enthusiastically at Clara whenever she spotted her. One day, Clara found Sophie drawing in the lobby while Lucas cleaned nearby offices. "What are you drawing?" Clara asked, sitting beside the child. "Our family," Sophie said matter-of-factly. Clara looked at the 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's your daddy, and that's you." "Who's that?" "That's you, silly. You're part of our family now." The casual certainty in Sophie's voice made Clara's throat tight. When had anyone claimed her as family without conditions or expectations? "Sophie," Lucas said gently, having appeared beside them. "Miss Clara is very busy. She's not—" "She's our friend," Sophie interrupted with the confidence of childhood. "And friends are family you choose." Clara met Lucas's eyes over his daughter's head. "She's right. Friends are family you choose." The meals in the cafeteria became routine. Clara would bring her laptop, pretending to work while actually listening to Sophie's chatter and Lucas's quiet observations about the world. "Why don't you eat in the executive dining room?" Lucas asked once. "Because the food's better down here," Clara replied, which was a lie, "and the company's better," which was the truth. Sophie had started bringing Clara into her world in small ways. She'd save her best drawings for Clara, share her snacks, and once brought a flower she'd picked from the building's garden. "For your desk," Sophie explained, "so you remember to smile." Clara put the wilting dandelion in a coffee mug on her desk, where it sat next to quarterly reports and acquisition contracts, a reminder that some things mattered more than profit margins. One evening, as Clara was leaving late, she found Lucas and Sophie in the parking garage. Sophie had fallen asleep in a corner while waiting for her father to finish work, and Lucas was carrying her toward the bus stop. "Let me give you a ride," Clara said. Lucas started to refuse. Proud, independent, not wanting charity. But Sophie stirred awake and smiled at Clara. "Miss Clara, are you coming to our house? If your daddy says it's okay." Lucas looked between his daughter's hopeful face and Clara's genuine offer. "Okay, thank you." The ride to Lucas's neighborhood was quiet. Clara saw the transition from her world to his, from gleaming high-rises to modest apartment buildings, from luxury cars to people waiting for buses. Lucas lived in a small but spotlessly clean apartment. Sophie's drawings covered the walls and everything was carefully maintained despite being clearly secondhand. "It's not much," Lucas said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's lovely," Clara replied, meaning it. This place had something her penthouse never had. It felt like a home. Sophie showed Clara her room, a tiny space made magical with homemade decorations and Lucas's careful attention to creating a child's paradise from almost nothing. "Daddy made everything," Sophie said proudly. "He's really good at fixing things and making things pretty." Clara looked at the handmade toy shelf, the curtains sewn from old fabric, the lamp Lucas had rewired and decorated. "He really is." Before Clara left, Sophie gave her the burned egg from her lunchbox. "You only ate a tiny bite before. You should have the rest." A trace of authenticity, the burned fried egg in Sophie's metal lunchbox, Lucas's imperfect but loving attempt to care for his daughter, which Clara ate completely while praising his cooking. Clara ate that burned egg, and it was the best meal she'd had in years, because it was made with love, shared with generosity, and eaten with people who saw her as just Clara, not as a title or a fortune. Rumors spread. CEO Clara was interested in a janitor, causing the family board to seethe. Marco Moretti, Clara's cousin, declared, "If you continue, we'll strip you of executive power." One evening, Clara went down to inspect a construction site and was suddenly blocked by people hired by Marco. Lucas happened to see Clara being forced to sign papers, relinquishing her position, and rushed in. "You janitor, dare you interfere with the board?" someone roared. Lucas stood in front of Clara. "Try touching her and see." His voice resonated. A fight broke out. Lucas took down each attacker using Old Navy skills. Clara trembled, seeing him this strong for the first time. Marco threw down papers, shouting, "Choose, the corporation or this cheap dignity." Clara looked at Lucas, then at Sophie, crying in fear. She stood up straight. "I choose the truth, and I choose the people you call worthless." Clara publicly recorded Marco's threats and sent them immediately to the media. The board was shaken. For the first time, a CEO stood against her own family. Lucas held Clara's hand, their warmth in the cold night like an invisible promise. The confrontation had been inevitable from the moment Clara chose to sit with Lucas at that restaurant. In the corporate world, there were unspoken rules about who belonged where, and Clara had violated every one of them. Marco had been waiting for an opportunity to remove her. Despite being CEO, Clara held only a slim majority of voting shares. If Marco could prove she was unfit for leadership, emotionally compromised, making poor decisions, associating with inappropriate people, he could orchestrate her removal. The setup at the construction site had been carefully planned. Marco's hired men were there to frighten her into signing documents that would transfer her shares to a family trust that he controlled. Once she was isolated, vulnerable, they'd assumed she would comply. They hadn't counted on Lucas. When Lucas had seen Clara's car still in the parking garage hours after everyone else had left, he'd felt uneasy. Sophie was at a friend's house for a sleepover, so he'd gone looking for Clara, finding her backed into a corner of the construction site. "Sign the papers, Ms. Moretti, and this can all be civilized," Marco's lead enforcer had been saying. "And if I refuse, then things become less civilized." That's when Lucas had stepped from the shadows. The enforcers had laughed at first, a janitor thinking he could take on trained security. But Lucas was former Navy, trained in close-quarters combat, and more importantly, he was fighting for someone who'd shown him dignity when everyone else had offered only contempt. The fight was swift and brutal. Lucas moved with the precision of someone who'd been in real combat, not just gym sparring. Within minutes, all three enforcers were on the ground, and Marco's plan was in ruins. You'll pay for this, Marco had snarled at Clara. Both of you will. But Clara had been recording everything on her phone. The threats, the illegal coercion, the admission that Marco had been planning a hostile takeover. No, Marco, you'll pay for this. The media storm that followed was unprecedented. CEO exposes family corruption became the headline, with Clara's recorded evidence going viral within hours. But the backlash against Clara personally was severe. Social media split into camps, some praising her courage, others mocking her for throwing away her legacy for a janitor. The cruelest posts suggested Lucas was using her, that he'd seduced a naive woman for money, that he was the real villain in the story. Lucas saw the comments and felt sick. This was exactly what he'd feared, that getting close to Clara would hurt her, that people like him weren't meant to be in the lives of people like her. I should go, he told Clara the day after the story broke. This was a mistake. I've ruined your reputation. You've done no such thing, Clara replied firmly. The only mistake would be letting other people's prejudice dictate my choices. But Sophie, she's being teased at school now. Kids saying her dad is trying to gold dig from you. It's not fair to her. Clara knelt to Sophie's level. Is that true, sweetheart? Are kids being mean? Sophie nodded, tears in her eyes. They say Daddy only likes you because you're rich. But that's not true. Daddy liked you when he thought you were just Miss Clara who ate with us in the cafeteria. You're absolutely right. And you know what? We're going to show everyone that love isn't about money or position. It's about respect and kindness and choosing each other every day. The board meeting the following week was the most contentious in Moretti Corporation history. Marco had rallied support, bringing in family members and old guard board members who believed Clara had brought shame to the company. You've made us a laughingstock, Marco declared. A CEO dating the janitor? It's degrading to everything this company represents. Clara stood at the head of the conference table, looking at each board member in turn. If this company is represented by prejudice, by the belief that some people matter more than others based on their job title, then maybe it deserves to be laughed at. She pulled up her presentation, not about Marco's crimes, though that information was there too. Instead, she showed employee satisfaction surveys, turnover rates, and productivity metrics. Our lowest paid employees have the highest turnover rate in the industry. They feel undervalued, invisible, treated as less than human. And we wonder why our service ratings are declining. She clicked to the next slide. I propose radical change, living wages for all employees, profit-sharing programs, respect as a core company value, not just a word in our mission statement. That will cost millions, someone protested, and earning it back through loyalty, productivity, and positive publicity will earn us billions. The story isn't CEO dates janitor. The story is company finally treats all workers with dignity. Which headline do you want? The vote was close, but Clara won. She kept her position, Marco was removed from the board, and Moretti Corporation began a transformation that would redefine it. But the real victory came later, when Lucas found Clara on the executive floor balcony, looking out at the city. You could have avoided all this mess if you just let me walk away, he said. Clara turned to him. But then I would have lost the person who reminded me why any of this matters. The person who showed me that dignity isn't about where you work, but how you live. The person who, along with his daughter, gave me back my humanity. Clara, I'm not finished. The person I've fallen completely in love with. Lucas felt tears he'd been holding back finally fall. No one had ever fought for him before. No one had ever chosen him over everything else. I love you too, he whispered, even though I have no idea how we make this work. One day at a time, Clara replied, choosing each other, one day at a time. Clara kept her CEO position, but decided to reform the corporation, opening scholarship funds for workers' children, raising minimum wages. Lucas was promoted to facilities manager, despite objections from some. Sophie ran happily through the opening of a small library Clara had funded. The child handed Clara a new book. I want you to read with me. Clara sat down reading each word, her voice so gentle it surprised even herself. Lucas watched from afar, eyes warm. He'd never thought anyone would enter his and his daughter's small world. One day Sophie asked, Will Miss Clara leave? Clara fell silent, then knelt to hug the child. If you want me to, I'll stay. On the office balcony, Clara and Lucas planted small flower pots, an image completely different from the cold power of before. The board gradually quieted in the face of positive results from new projects. Clara realized true power doesn't lie in boardrooms, but in everyday smiles. Lucas gave her an old work rag he'd used, now washed and folded flat. This went with me through many long nights. Now it belongs to you. Clara took it, eyes welling with tears. The transformation of Moretti Corporation wasn't just policy changes. It was cultural revolution from the inside out. Clara had instituted Listen and Learn Fridays where executives would spend time working alongside employees at all levels. She'd personally cleaned bathrooms, worked in the mailroom, and spent a day in customer service. This is beneath your position, Marco had protested before his removal. Nothing is beneath my position if it helps me understand the people I serve, Clara had replied. Lucas's promotion had been controversial, but Clara had insisted. He knew the building better than anyone, understood maintenance needs, and more importantly, he treated every worker with respect regardless of their role. His first act as facilities manager was to implement a mentorship program, pairing janitors and maintenance workers with tradespeople who could teach them skills for career advancement. My predecessor's attitude was that cleaning staff should stay cleaning staff, Lucas explained to Clara, but everyone deserves a chance to grow. Sophie had become something of a mascot for the company's new direction. Children's drawings now decorated the executive floor, and Clara had started a Bring Your Kid to Work program that made the sterile corporate environment feel more human. One Saturday, Clara took Sophie and Lucas to the newly opened community center the company had funded in Lucas's neighborhood. As they walked through rooms filled with after-school programs and job training classes, Sophie squeezed both their hands. You made this happen, she said to Clara, with the simple certainty of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for. We made this happen, Clara corrected. Your daddy showed me what was missing. You showed me why it mattered. The media coverage had shifted from scandal to inspiration. Business journals were writing articles about Moretti Corporation's human-centered transformation. Other companies were reaching out, wanting to implement similar programs. But the real measure of success came in smaller moments. Like when a janitor who'd worked there for 20 years stopped Lucas in the hallway. My daughter just got accepted to college. On the scholarship Ms. Moretti set up. First person in our family to go to college. Or when employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement across all departments. Or when the company's stock price rose despite initial investor fears, proving that treating people well was also good business. One evening, as Clara and Lucas sat in the small garden they'd planted on the executive floor balcony, she showed him an email. It's from the co-workers who set you up on that fake blind date, she said. They want to apologize. Lucas read the email. It was sincere, acknowledging how cruel they'd been, how they'd failed to see him as fully human. What do you think? Clara asked. Should I accept the apology on your behalf? It's not your apology to accept. But yes, I forgive them. Holding on to anger would just poison me. Clara marveled at his capacity for forgiveness. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just someone who knows that hurt people. They were probably bullied too, somewhere along the way. The cycle has to break somewhere. Sophie appeared in the doorway, having been at a board-sponsored art class. Look what I painted. It was a picture of the three of them, standing under a rainbow with the words, Family of the Heart, written in her careful letters. Clara took the painting, feeling the now familiar tightness in her throat. It's beautiful. Sweetheart, can we put it on the wall in your office? We absolutely can. Right next to the quarterly reports and acquisition documents. Lucas laughed. Sophie's art displayed next to corporate strategy. Your board must love that. Actually, Clara said, they've started doing it in their offices too. Turns out that remembering we're human makes us better at business, not worse. That night, as Clara drove Lucas and Sophie back to their apartment, which they were finally moving out of into a better place in a safer neighborhood, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat. Thank you, Lucas said quietly. For what? For seeing me, for seeing us, for choosing us when it would have been so much easier to choose your world. You are my world now, Clara replied. You and Sophie. Everything else is just details. One morning, sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the old factory, once filled only with dust. Now it had transformed into a community center with art classes for children. Sophie ran in excitedly, showing off a new drawing. Daddy, Miss Clara, and me, family. Clara held the picture, whispering, more beautiful than any contract I've ever signed. Lucas smiled, sitting down to fit it into a wooden frame, hanging it neatly on the wall. Clara set down the family ring on the table, then turned to look at Lucas. If you two still need me, I want to stay. Lucas squeezed her hand, voice choked. Welcome home. Sophie hugged both of them tightly, laughter ringing out joyfully. Outside, workers' children happily entered the new classroom, carrying bright dreams. Clara stood on the balcony looking down, heart at ease. She had chosen correctly. Lucas whispered, family isn't where you're born, but where you choose each other, every day. Clara nodded, eyes bright. And I choose again, here, with you both. The story ends with the smiles of three people, opening a family no one expected would exist. 6 months later, the transformation was complete, not just of Moretti Corporation, but of all three of their lives. Lucas and Sophie had moved into a comfortable apartment near Clara's penthouse. Not living together yet, they were taking things slowly for Sophie's sake, but close enough that they could have dinner together every night. Sophie's school had noticed the change in her. She was more confident, more engaged, no longer the quiet child who'd learned to make herself small to avoid drawing attention to their poverty. She's thriving, her teacher told Lucas and Clara at a parent-teacher conference, their first one together. Whatever you're doing, it's working. What they were doing was simple. They were being a family, chosen, deliberate, built on respect and love rather than obligation or convention. The blind date setup that had been meant to humiliate Lucas had become something of a legend in the company. New employees heard the story, how the CEO had defended a janitor, how she'd chosen love over prejudice, how everything had changed from that moment. Is it true, a young intern asked Clara once, that you really fell in love with him at first sight? Clara smiled. Not at first sight, but at first act of courage, when he prepared to walk away with dignity despite humiliation. I saw someone extraordinary. The old co-workers who'd set up the cruel prank had all left the company, not fired, but unable to stay in an environment that had so clearly rejected their values. Clara had heard one of them was working at a competitor and had implemented similar dignity-focused policies there. Maybe cruelty planted seeds of kindness after all, Lucas observed when Clara told him. Or maybe people are capable of growth when they're shown a better way. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Clara and Lucas took Sophie to the newly opened community center, the renovated factory where it had all begun, now transformed into a place of learning and growth. Sophie's artwork, the one showing their chosen family, hung in the entrance, alongside dozens of other children's drawings. This is where it started, Sophie said, looking around with the satisfaction of someone who'd been part of creating something good. This is where you both became brave. Clara knelt beside the child. You know what? You're right. This is where we learned that families aren't about where you come from, but who you choose to love. And keep choosing, Lucas added, putting his arm around both of them. Every single day, Clara agreed. As they walked out into the sunshine, Sophie between them, holding both their hands, Clara felt something she'd never experienced in all her years of corporate success: completeness. Not because she'd acquired something or achieved some milestone, but because she'd learned to see value in unexpected places, because she'd chosen love over convention, because she'd discovered that the measure of a person had nothing to do with their job title and everything to do with their character. And because two extraordinary people, a man who'd never stopped being decent despite the world's cruelty, and a child who believed in the possibility of love, had chosen her right back. If you believe healing stories like this deserve to be shared, please leave a comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.